Hello and welcome back to my channel. How are you all doing today? I will be talking about the Montana Book Company Reading Challenge for 2023 today. So this is a year-long reading challenge hosted by the Montana Book Company, which is a bookstore. And of course I first heard of this challenge because I saw Greg of Supposedly Fun talk about it, and I thought it was a fun challenge to do. Obviously it's a bit random because it is hosted by a bookstore that is in a completely different country from where I am, and I've never visited it, and it's quite likely that I never will. But I did really like this challenge, and from what I've seen online, I really like what the Montana Book Company is doing for their local communities. So yeah, it is a year-long challenge, like I said. It has 29 prompts, and I thought today I'll just go through the prompts and talk about my plans on what to read, any ideas I have, any recommendations if I have some. And yeah, let's just get into it. You can find all the prompts on their website, which is where I printed mine out. Yeah, I'm just going to start with the first one, and that is read a non-fiction or fiction book by a transgender author about trans characters or transgender issues. And for this I plan to read a book that's gonna come out soon, and that is I Am by Sam Bettins, which is a memoir. The author came out as a trans man a few years ago when he was in his late 40s, I believe, and here he is most well known as the lead singer of a Belgian rock band, Case Choice, who mainly had a couple of hits in the late 90s. I'm not sure how well known they are outside of sort of Belgium and the Netherlands, but they were on the Buffy the Vampire soundtrack, so maybe you know them from there. Yeah, and he wrote a book about his experience as coming out as a trans man at a later point in life. I'm really interested in reading that. Okay, prompt number 2 is to finish a book you DNF'd, did not finish, in the past couple of years. Now, this is not the prompt I'm the most excited about, because when I decide to not finish a book, it's usually because I don't really like it. But then I remembered I did a try a chapter tag last year with some books that were recommended by friends. So I made a video where I started 6 different books and then picked the ones I wanted to continue reading by the end of the year, and I ended up reading 2 of those books, but 4 of those I didn't finish, but I would still like to continue reading them. So yeah, I'll probably pick one of those. Prompt number 3 is a book about deafness or with deaf characters or by a deaf author. I don't really have anything on my shelf from that. I forgot to say at the beginning that I am trying to use books from my own shelves as much as I can for these prompts, but I didn't have any options for this prompt on my bookshelves. There's 3 books I'm sort of thinking about that are all by deaf authors and with deaf characters. So the first one is True Biz by Sarah Novich, which I think came out last year, and I've heard really positive things about. The next is The Perseverance by Raymond Antrobus, which is a poetry collection. And the last is What Willow Says by Lynn Buckle, which won the Barbellion Prize last year. All 3 of these books got really positive reviews, so and I just think I'll see which one is available to me. Number 4 is to read a book where the setting is an island, fiction or non-fiction. And I will be reading The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak, which is set on Cyprus, which is a country that is an island. Technically there are quite a few countries that are also islands. You could, read a book from the UK or Japan or Australia, and those are all islands. But I don't think that's what they really meant with that challenge. But this does have island in the title, so I feel like it has that sort of islandy feel to it. Another recommendation would be The Summer Book by Tove Jansson, which is set on a really small island in Finland, where a young girl goes to live for the summer with her grandmother. I can't quite remember if they are the only people on that island or if there are a few other people there as well, but it does have that sort of typical island feel to it. Number 5 is a novel written from the perspective of an animal, and I have read Snow Dog Food by Claudia Morandini, which has a talking dog in it, but it's not really entirely from the perspective of an animal. So I sort of penciled it in, and if I haven't read anything better by the end of the year, I'll count it. Another book I have in mind for this is Glory by No Violet Bulawayo, which is sort of a political satire book where all the characters are animals as well. Another book that would be great for this is When I Sing Mountains Dance by Irene Sola. Again, it's not entirely written from the perspective of an animal, but there are definitely some chapters that are. Number 6 is a book recommended by one of your favorite authors. And for this I have read Where Angels Fear to Tread by E.M. Forster, because it was recommended by Carson McCullers. I found this really great website where they have collected hundreds and hundreds of book lists of people who have talked about their favorite books. So there's authors talking about their favorite books, but also musicians, actors, politicians, all sorts of famous people. I'm sure you're going to find a favorite author there and their favorite book, so I'll link that down below. Number 7 is to read a book with an ace or a sexual character, and I was planning to read Loveless by Alice Oseman for this, but then I recently read The Charm Offenses by Alison Cochrane, which also turns out to have an ace character in it. And of course I'd also recommend Ace by Angela Chen, which is a non-fiction book, so it doesn't really have an ace character in it, but it's one of my favorite non-fiction books of the last couple of years, so if I have an opportunity to mention it, I will take it. Number 8 is to read a book that is banned or challenged in your local state or area. So now here in the Netherlands, banning books isn't really a thing. So I picked a book that was the most banned book in the US last year, and that is Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. Banning a book because it talks about gender identity is really baffling and infuriating to me, so I think this is a very important book to read and important to support this author and other genderqueer authors. Then goal number 9 is to read a fiction or non-fiction book about social or political activism. I'm kind of following on from that last book. I will be reading The Transgender Issue by Sean Fay for this one, which I believe is just kind of what it says on the title. it is something I definitely want to educate myself more about. So I am really looking forward to reading this book. Problem number 10 is to reread a book from your formative years that you thought was so good then. And I feel like your formative years could basically be anything, because you are constantly evolving and becoming. I had this idea in mind where I might do a reading vlog where I revisit some of my favorite literary fiction books from my early 20s, when I really started getting into literary fiction. So yeah, that's just sort of an idea I have in my mind, but I don't know exactly what book I will pick up for this one. Number 11 is read a bookseller recommendation that you wouldn't normally dream of reading. Now, to pick up a book I wouldn't normally dream of reading sounds a bit strong to me. What I think I might do is that in my local bookstore they have these really great recommendations tables where they display books that are recommended by the staff. So I think I'll browse through that and sort of pick the one that least appeals to me from that table. Number 12 is read a duology or the first 2 books in a longer series. I do really want to read a duology for this one rather than start a new series. The thing is, most duologies that are coming out now are YA fantasy books, which isn't my first choice of book genre. But I do have sort of 2 duologies in mind that I might pick up. The first one is the Parable of the Sower and the Parable of the Talents by Octavia E. Butler. I'm not sure like what they are called as a series, but that's one option. Or the Monk and Robots duology by Becky Chambers, so A Song for the Wild Build and A Prayer for the Crowned Shy. So probably either one of those duologies. Number 13 is a prompt I've also already finished, and that is to read a book of poetry from a poet whose work you haven't explored yet. And I read a book of poetry by a Dutch poet, Doe het toch maar, by Bob Schons, who is a spoken word poet, and I just finished their collection last month. Number 14 is to read a non-fiction book about the natural world, and I finished this one as well, and I read A Bird's Way by Jennifer Ackerman, which is obviously all about birds. Another option for my bookshelf would have been Black Lion, A Life in the Wilderness by Cicelo Umbata, which is a memoir by a wilderness guide in South Africa. And one book I always recommend when talking about nature writing is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Goal number 15 is to read a book by an author writing during the Harlem Renaissance. Obviously we mean a black author, they specify as well. And for that I will be reading Hitting a Straight Leg with a Crooked Stick by Zora Neale Hurston. And these are collected short stories, some of them which haven't been published before. And it says here on the back as well, brought together for the first time, the collection includes 8 of Hurston's Lost Harlem gems. So at least some of these were written during the Harlem Renaissance. Number 16 is a novel set in the near future where the impacts of climate change or global warming are present, also known as cli-fi. And this is definitely a prompt I need to look in a bit more. I have a few ideas, but yeah, I don't know what I would read for this yet. I'm gonna do a bit more investigation for this one. Number 17 is a book written by a female philosopher. And at first I was thinking, oh my goodness, I really need to do a lot of research into this one because I didn't know any female philosophers. But then when I opened Middlemarch by George Eliot, the introduction says Mary Evans or George Eliot, was a philosopher, journalist and translator before he became a novelist. So yeah, not much. George Eliot, who was a philosopher. Number 18 is read a book you know you should probably read but have been avoiding. Now, I don't really believe in books that you should read. You know, unless you're reading books for school, you are not really obliged to read any books. But I did do a video earlier this year where I talked about books that will self-destruct if I hadn't read them by the end of the year. So I think basically any of those will count. But especially Know My Name by Chanel Miller, because I think it tackles a really important topic. Yeah, I've heard so many people say it's a really good book. Number 19 is a book about a musician, about music, or by a musician. And for that I will be reading Corregidora by Gil Jones, because the main character in this book is a blues singer. Number 20 is a book about HIV or AIDS, fiction or non-fiction. I don't have anything on my to-be-read shelves. One book I'm thinking about is The Great Believers by Rebecca Mackay. So maybe I'll pick that one up, but if you have any other recommendations, I'd love to know. A fiction book I'd recommend for this would be Christodora. Is that what it's called? Christodora by Tim Murphy. And non-fiction and a non-fiction recommendation on AIDS is How to Survive a Plague by David France. Number 21 is a prize winner from 2022. Any book prize will do, and I thought I would have to get a new book for this prompt, but then I saw that this book, Skinship by Yoon Choi, won the Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize for debut short story collection. So that's what I'll be picking up for that prompt. Number 2022 is read something funny, maybe a book by a comedian, one of those comical mysteries, or a memoir by someone who makes you laugh. We need funny. So I have no idea yet what to read for this prompt, because I don't really read funny books. I'll have a giggle at something that's funny in a book, but I don't really read any books that are purposely funny. So yeah, that is still wide open. We're getting to the last page. 23 is to read a memoir in essays. And for this I will be picking up Small Bodies of Water by Nina Minya Powles. And it says on the back, exploring everything from migration, food, family, earthquakes and the ancient lunar solar calendar, Nina reflects on a girlhood spent growing up between two cultures and what it means to belong. So yeah, I think that fits the bill. Number 24 is to read a book by Bell Hooks. Now, I read Feminism is for Everybody last year, and I think this year I would like to read her essay collection All About Love, because I heard a lot of good things about that one. Number 25 is to read a cookbook or book written about food, cooking, or by a chef. And I have read In the Keuken, which is an essay collection on food writing, and I'm also reading Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zano, which is a food memoir. Number 26 is to read a book by an Indigenous author, and I am in the middle of listening to an audiobook of Too Much Liver by Melissa Lukashenko, who is an Australian Indigenous author. Then number 27 is to read a true crime book, and they note sometimes folks write bad books that exploit victims. Try and find something that takes itself seriously and deals with the topic professionally. And for this I will be reading Sanda Dia by Peter Huybrechts, which is about a boy that died during a hazing ritual. that he participated in when he wanted to join a fraternity. And I think it's a book that dives into that particular event, but also talks about the more broader issues that fraternities bring up, like privilege, classism, racism and things like that. And number 28 is you choose a new category for next year and read a book in that category. So now for most of these prompts I wanted to read books from my shelf, but for this prompt I purposely wanted to pick something that I couldn't find on my bookshelves. And the prompt I'm thinking of right now is to read a book with a Jewish protagonist that is set outside of the Holocaust. Yeah, that's just sort of what I had in my mind to read right now. So if you have any recommendations for that, I'd love to know. And then the last prompt is to attend an author event at your local bookshop or online, and maybe read that book too. Obviously this is also a prompt that is still open. I have been looking at the events put up by my local bookshops. There hasn't really been anything that interested me yet, but I'm sure something will come up, and yeah, I'm looking forward to attending an author event in my area. So yeah, that was it. That was all the 29 prompts for the Montana Book Company Reading Challenge. If you are also participating in this reading challenge, I'd really love to know. And if you have any ideas or recommendations for any of the prompts I've mentioned today, then please leave them down below. That's it for today. I hope you are well, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.